He was just a struggling single dad rushing into a crowded school hallway, late for a parent meeting he didn't even want to attend. But the moment he opened the wrong classroom door, a woman turned to him, and with a voice that trembled like memory, she whispered, "So it's really you." What followed wasn't just a story about chance. It was a quiet unraveling of the past, a healing journey through trust, love, and the kind of second chances that life rarely offers. But not everything is as simple as it seems, and sometimes the most unexpected moments are the ones that rewrite everything. Before we begin, if you believe in heartwarming stories, in the quiet power of love and redemption, and in the extraordinary beauty of ordinary people, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more inspiring stories like this one. Now take a breath. Let's begin. A struggling single dad went to the wrong parent meeting, but she whispered, "So it's really you." Ben Carter tightened the strap on his beat-up canvas backpack and jogged up the cracked sidewalk leading to Lincoln Elementary. The early autumn air carried a damp chill, and the maple trees lining the school's entrance were already dusted in amber and red. His flannel shirt clung to his back sweat from another night shift stocking. Shelves followed by a frantic rush to drop Lucy off and get here on time. Late again, he pushed open the glass door, greeted by the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of old floor wax and crayons. A PTA volunteer smiled from behind a folding table stacked with directories and sign-in sheets. "Mr. Carter, Lucy's dad?" she asked cheerfully. Ben nodded, breathless. "Yeah, first grade." She glanced down, then pointed room 2B, last door on the left. Ben mumbled a thanks and headed down the corridor, his boots thudding softly against the linoleum. As he passed colorful student artwork taped to the walls, stick figures holding hands, painted pumpkins, he let out a breath and rubbed the back of his neck. "I can do this," he told himself. One parent-teacher meeting, smile, nod. Try not to look like you haven't slept since 2019. When he reached room 2B, the door was slightly ajar. Voices murmured inside, so he pushed gently and stepped in. It was quieter than he expected. Neat rows of miniature desks filled the room, but the adult-sized chairs gathered near the whiteboard were nearly all occupied. He found a seat in the back, lowering himself quietly, hoping not to draw attention. That's when he saw her. At the front of the room, a woman stood with a class list in her hand. Her honey blonde hair was swept up into a loose chignon, elegant in its imperfection. She wore a tailored navy blazer over a soft cream blouse, simple gold earrings glinting under the lights. Her posture was graceful, confident, but the moment her eyes landed on him, everything in her seemed to still. There was a beat, barely more than a breath, and then her lips parted. "So it's really you," she whispered so softly he almost didn't hear it. Ben blinked. The woman's voice cracked slightly as she addressed the room, eyes flitting away from him like a bird startled mid-flight. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Claire Whitmore, parent rep for Ms. Landon's class. Thank you for being here." Ben sat frozen. His brain was still buffering. Claire Miller, no Whitmore now, but the face was unmistakable, older, sure, and more refined, but the same high cheekbones, the same sharp, curious eyes, and that voice, lower now, steadier, but threaded with the same warmth he remembered. His chest tightened with a pressure he hadn't felt in years, like the wind had knocked into him without warning. She didn't look at him again during the rest of the meeting. Not directly. She read announcements, coordinated volunteer duties, fielded questions from eager parents about the bake sale. Her poise never wavered, but Ben barely heard a word. He was too busy rewinding the tape in his mind 10 years ago. A summer in the Blue Ridge Mountains. A girl in a yellow sundress, bare feet on the hood of his old Chevy, laughing as they counted stars. Then one morning gone, no note, no goodbye, just silence. The bell above the classroom door chimed faintly as the meeting ended. Chairs scraped, parents murmured goodbyes, and Ben stood slowly, unsure what to do. Claire was gathering papers into a manila folder when he approached. He hesitated, hovering Claire. He said, his voice low. She looked up. Her eyes were glassy now, just slightly. "I wasn't sure it was you," she said quietly, a ghost of a smile tugging at one corner of her mouth. Ben ran a hand through his thick dark hair, now peppered with gray at the temples. "I almost didn't recognize you." You haven't changed that much, she said. Still late. Still walking in like you own the place. He let out a surprised laugh, soft and rueful. Yeah, well, some things never change. Their eyes held for a moment longer than strangers should. She looked down, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. I didn't expect this. I was just here for my daughter's meeting, he said, then glanced back at the door. Wait, this isn't room 1B, is it? Nope. You crashed Max's class. Her tone was teasing, but her fingers fidgeted with the edge of the folder. Max, he repeated. Your son, she nodded. 8th, 3rd grade. Ben stared at the floor. Lucy's 7th, 1st grade. I guess I was more sleep-deprived than I thought. Claire smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Well, it's good to see you. Really, he hesitated. There was too much to ask and nowhere to start before he could speak again. A boy with messy, dark blonde hair ran in Mom. You said we could get hot chocolate after Claire turned. We will, sweetheart. Just a second. Ben watched as the boy, Max, looked up at him, eyes wide, cautious. Something about those eyes tugged at Ben's chest. Claire put a hand on Max's shoulder. Ben, this is my son, Max. This is an old friend. Max gave a polite nod, then leaned into his mother's side. Ben offered a small wave. Nice to meet you. Max. Claire glanced at him again. We should maybe catch up. Properly. He nodded. I'd like that. She hesitated, then scribbled something on a sticky note and handed it to him. A phone number. Her handwriting hadn't changed. Then with a gentle smile, she took Max's hand and walked away. Ben stood in the empty classroom, heart thudding, like it was trying to remember how to feel something it had forgotten. He looked down at the note. Claire. After all these years, he didn't know what kind of story this was yet, but it had just begun. Ben stared at the note in his palm like it might evaporate if he blinked. Claire Whitmore, 10 years. A full decade, and then some washed away in a single moment inside a classroom that wasn't even meant to be his. He walked out of Lincoln Elementary with the school buzz behind him, the chatter of kids, the rumble of car engines, the soft creak of the old flagpole in the breeze, but none of it registered. His boots hit the pavement on autopilot as he crossed the parking lot, got into his dusty Ford Ranger, and shut the door. He didn't start the engine. Instead, he sat there gripping the steering wheel, his knuckles pale under the worn leather of his gloves. He could still hear her voice, still feel the way her eyes had locked onto his. Just for a second, like they were the only two people in that room. The years had changed her. She looked polished now. A little older, sure, but more so complete. Like life had carried her forward while he'd stayed rooted, stuck in a loop of long hours, overdue bills, and making Lucy's school lunches before the sun came up. He hadn't thought about Claire in a long time. Not really. Not since the pain stopped stinging and settled into something duller, like a scar you forget about until you move a certain way. But now, just like that, she was back, and all those unanswered questions rose to the surface sharper than ever. Why did she leave without a word? Why didn't she ever call? Why now? He turned the key and the engine sputtered to life. That evening, after Lucy was bathed and tucked in her favorite stuffed bunny under one arm, a little dried toothpaste still at the corner of her mouth, Ben sat at the tiny kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, the sticky note in front of him. He stared at the number. His thumb hovered over his phone. Dial or don't reopen old wounds or let the past stay buried. But then he thought about Max's eyes, how familiar they looked. How something in his expression had hit Ben's chest like a quiet thunderclap. He tapped the screen. The phone rang once, twice. Hello. Her voice softer than it had been in the classroom. Tired maybe, or guarded. Hey, it's Ben. Silence. Then a breath. I didn't think you'd call this soon. I almost didn't, he admitted. But there's too much I don't understand. Another pause. I know I'm not looking to rehash everything tonight, he said quickly. But maybe we could talk. In person, somewhere neutral. There was a beat, then her voice came through steadier now. There's a coffee shop just off Main Bluebird Cafe. Tomorrow at 10. He exhaled slowly. I'll be there. The Bluebird Cafe sat at the corner of two sleepy streets, all brick and ivy, with a painted sign that had seen better days. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and worn books. Ben arrived early, habit maybe, or nerves. He ordered black coffee and found a booth by the window. Claire arrived 5 minutes late. though she looked like she'd stepped out of a lifestyle magazine. Cashmere sweater, slim jeans, a delicate scarf that looked effortlessly expensive. Yet her eyes held that same depth, familiar and elusive all at once. "Hi," she said simply, sliding into the seat across from him. "Hi." They stared at each other for a moment, the weight of a decade hanging in the space between them. "Still drink it black?" she asked. He nodded. "And you still wear scarves indoors?" She smiled. "Some things never change." They sat in silence for a few moments, the clatter of cups and soft jazz around them. Finally, Claire spoke. "I owe you an explanation." "You think?" he said, and then instantly regretted the bite in his voice. "Sorry, that was—" "No," she interrupted gently. "You have every right." Ben folded his hands. "So what happened, Claire?" "You left. No goodbye. Just gone." She looked down at her coffee. "It wasn't the plan. I was supposed to go home for a weekend and come right back. And then I found out I was pregnant." Ben's stomach clenched. The air between them thinned. She continued. "I was scared, 26. No job lined up, no support. My parents weren't understanding. And you, Ben, you were barely getting by, so your answer was to vanish. I thought I was doing the right thing." Her voice cracked. "I convinced myself I was protecting you. I married someone else when Max was 2, tried to make a life, but it didn't work. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry. So Max is yes." Her eyes met his unwavering. "He's your son." Ben gripped the edge of the table. His heart slammed in his chest. "I wasn't ready to tell him," she whispered. "And now after yesterday, I don't know if I ever will be." Ben sat back stunned. The world outside the window seemed to move in slow motion. Cars passing, leaves fluttering, a woman walking her dog. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. "I missed everything," he said quietly. His first words, first steps, birthdays. I didn't even know he existed. Tears welled in Claire's eyes, but she blinked them back. "I know, and I'll never be able to make that right, but I didn't know how to face you." Not then. They sat in silence again, both breathing heavily with the weight of everything unsaid. Ben finally nodded. "Okay, okay," she echoed. "Okay, I need time, but I'm not walking away." Claire looked at him, hope flickering faintly in her expression. "I want him to know you, Ben. I really do. I just, I need your help. Figuring out how." He nodded once Claire reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. It was slightly faded Max as a baby, chubby cheeks, round eyes, a blanket with tiny trucks. Ben took it with trembling fingers, and something in him, something old and tired, began to stir back to life. The next few days passed like drifting fog. Ben went through the motions, working the overnight shift, making Lucy's lunches, folding laundry that never seemed to end, but his mind kept circling back to that booth at the Bluebird Cafe. To Claire's voice, trembling but steady. To the photo of baby Max, now tucked carefully in the drawer beside his bed. He didn't tell Lucy anything. Not yet. How could he? How do you explain to a 7-year-old that she might have a brother she's never met? That her father missed out on 8 years of a life he didn't even know he helped create? Ben's world had already been narrow work. Lucy, the truck that threatened to give out with every cold morning. But now the past had cracked it wide open. Not just memories, but responsibility, and something else deeper, unspoken longing. For what might have been, for what still could be. It was Saturday morning when his phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "We'll be at the park near Maple Creek at 11. Thought you might want to come. No pressure, no demand, just a simple offer." Ben stared at the text, then at Lucy, sitting on the couch in her pajamas, coloring a picture of a fox in a snowstorm. "Hey, Lou," he said, voice careful. "How about a trip to the park?" She didn't look up. "Can I bring my scooter?" "You bet." Maple Creek Park was one of those places that looked plucked from a postcard. Rolling lawns, a wide pond with ducks, an aging gazebo near the edge of the trail. Families were scattered across picnic blankets. Dogs bounded across the grass. And somewhere in the distance, a group of teenagers played a half-hearted game of baseball. Ben spotted them instantly. Claire sitting on a bench under a maple tree, and Max crouched near a pile of twigs, building something only a kid could fully understand. Claire waved her smile, cautious. Ben walked slowly, holding Lucy's hand. She clutched her scooter with the other eyes scanning the playground for something more interesting than adult conversation. "This is Lucy," Ben said as they approached Lou. "This is Miss Claire." Claire bent slightly, offering her hand. "Hi, Lucy. I've heard you're quite the artist." Lucy grinned shyly. "I like foxes, I do too." And that, Ben added, nodding toward the boy still focused on his twig creation, "is Max." Max looked up. His face was curious, but neutral. "Hey," he said, then went back to work. Ben lowered himself onto the bench beside Claire as Lucy wandered off toward the jungle gym. For a few moments they just sat watching, listening, letting the presence of each other settle in like cautious neighbors. "He's a good kid," Ben said, finally nodding toward Max. "He is," Claire smiled, curious. "Kind, stubborn, runs in the family." Claire glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "He doesn't know." "Not yet." Ben nodded. "I get it. I mean, I don't. But I'm trying." She looked down at her lap. "I was going to tell him this year. I just didn't expect you to show up out of nowhere." "I didn't exactly plan it either." Claire chuckled softly, then turned serious. "What about Lucy?" "I haven't said anything. I don't know how to. She's just starting to feel like life is steady again." He paused after her mom left. "I promised her I'd never surprise her like that." Claire's eyes softened. "You've done a good job with her." "I've tried," he exhaled. "It's not easy." "No, it's not." There was a pause. The air was cool, laced with the scent of damp earth and the hint of wood smoke from a distant barbecue. Ben's fingers fiddled with a loose thread on his cuff. "She reminds me of you," he said suddenly. "Claire, Lucy. She's got that same fierce light. That don't mess with me look when she's determined," Claire smiled. "I used to scare you with that look. You still do." They both laughed, the kind of laughter that cracks open something buried. It didn't last long, but it was enough. Max wandered over, holding something in his hands. "Look, Mom." He held up a stick figure. Man made of twigs and grass, bound with a blade of long grass, like a tiny scarecrow. Claire admired it. "Very creative. Is that someone you know?" Max shrugged. "Just someone who might be a dad." Ben felt something in his chest twist sharp and sudden. Claire froze. Max turned to Ben. "Want to help me build another?" Ben looked at Claire. She gave the tiniest nod. "I'd like that," Ben said, standing slowly. "You got a spare stick?" "Plenty." As they walked toward the pile of twigs, Ben heard Claire behind him, her voice low but steady. "Maybe the best way to begin is to just be there, one moment at a time." He nodded without turning back. One moment at a time, he could do that. They built two more stick people, one tall and crooked, the other short, and with arms made of flower stems. Max named them Sky Dad and Bunny Girl. Ben didn't ask why, he just smiled and helped them stand. When Lucy joined them, Max handed her one of the stick figures. "I made her for you." Lucy looked at it, then at Max. "Thanks." And that was that. No fireworks, no speeches. Just two kids sitting in the grass comparing imaginary friends made of bark and leaves. Ben stood beside Claire again, hands in his pockets, the sun starting to slide westward. "They'll figure it out," she said. "So will we." She turned to him, something soft in her eyes. "You think so?" Ben looked out over the park, his daughter and his son laughing near the trees. For the first time in years, he felt something settle inside him. Hope. "Yeah," he said, "I really do." The next time Ben saw Max, it was in the most ordinary place, lined up with a gaggle of 8-year-olds at school pickup. The children spilled from the double doors like a tide, bursting into chatter, and backpacks flapping like wings. Lucy was among the first out, running to Ben with the fierce, familiar energy of someone who believed her dad could fix anything. "Daddy," she squealed. "We did volcanoes. I got red jello in my hair, but Miss Platt said it made me look fierce." Ben laughed, brushing a sticky strand from her forehead. "You're a force of nature, all right." She dug into his pocket for the mini pretzels he always brought. As she munched, Ben's eyes wandered back toward the building, just as Claire appeared holding Max's backpack in one hand and waving at someone over her shoulder. Max followed a few paces behind her, slower than the rest. Thoughtful as usual, his eyes scanned the crowd, then landed on Ben. They studied each other across the blacktop. Max with his hands in his hoodie pocket, Ben with Lucy on his hip, and there it was again. That quiet jolt in Ben's chest, that eerie familiarity he still wasn't used to. It wasn't just the dark hair or the slope of the shoulders. It was the way Max furrowed his brow when thinking, the way he tilted his head slightly to the right before speaking small, unremarkable things that mirrored Ben's own habits so precisely they felt like echoes from another lifetime. Claire caught up and offered a quick smile. "Hey, Ben." "Hey." Lucy tugged on his sleeve. "Can I go see Max's science poster?" Claire raised an eyebrow. "I think he'd like that." With a nod of approval from both parents, Lucy grabbed Max's hand without hesitation, dragging him toward the bench near the bike racks, where he'd stashed a rolled-up cardboard display. Max glanced back only once to check if it was okay. Ben gave a little wave, and Max turned back, letting Lucy chatter beside him. Claire stood beside Ben, arms folded loosely. "It's, strange, isn't it?" Ben didn't look at her. "Yeah, it is. Every time I see them together," she said, "it's like pieces I didn't know were missing start clicking into place." Ben rubbed his jaw. "He's like me." Claire turned to face him fully. "He is. In so many ways." Ben inhaled slowly, and he doesn't know why. "No," she said softly, "but he senses something. He's a perceptive kid." They stood in silence a while, watching the two children compare drawings and laugh, like they'd known each other for years. Claire broke the quiet first. "Do you remember that camping trip we took to Blackwater Ridge?" Ben chuckled. "The one where the tent collapsed in the middle of the night and we ended up sleeping in the truck bed, with a raccoon trying to get into the cooler." He laughed harder now, the sound catching him by surprise. "You screamed louder than the bear alarm?" Claire grinned. "I did not. You absolutely did." She smiled, then looked away, her expression sobering. "Max loves camping. He builds tents out of couch cushions and begs me to take him out into the woods. But I don't know. I guess I was waiting for the right person to take him." Ben didn't respond right away. He watched Max point to a chart on the poster, and Lucy nod solemnly, as if decoding nuclear science. Then he said, "Maybe we should try, all of us." Claire looked at him, cautious. "Camping, a day trip. Nothing big, just, something small, natural, honest." She hesitated, then nodded. "That might be good." Ben turned toward her. "I don't want to push him or confuse him, but if there's a chance to just be around, let things settle on their own." Claire reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it to him. He wrote this for school, a letter to his future self. Ben unfolded it carefully. The paper was crinkled, the pencil marks faint. "Dear me, I hope you're still building things. Maybe a robot or a treehouse. I hope you have a best friend who always shares their granola bars and never calls you weird. I hope you know who your dad is, and I hope he likes camping too. Love, Max." Ben stared at the letter, throat tight. Claire touched his arm gently. "He's been asking more questions lately, I think. He's ready to know, or at least to start knowing." Ben looked up, his eyes glassy but dry. "So am I." Later that evening, after Lucy had gone to bed and the dishes were done, Ben stood at his kitchen window watching the porch light flicker against the night. The letter sat on the table behind him. He had read it 5 times. Every word he imagined. Max in pajamas, curled up with a book about astronauts. He imagined telling him, sitting across from him on that same park bench, saying, "I'm your dad." It terrified him, but it also felt right. He didn't know how it would go. What questions Max would ask. What hurt might come up in the process. But he knew he couldn't back away now. That little boy had asked the world quietly, gently for a father, and the world for once had led them to each other. Ben turned off the kitchen light and stood in the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Tomorrow he would call Claire. Tomorrow they'd make a plan. Tomorrow he'd begin answering a question that had lived in Max's heart for far too long. Saturday morning came warm and golden, the kind of early fall day that made you believe the world hadn't completely lost its magic. Lincoln Elementary had sent out a school-wide notice about a volunteer gardening day, pulling weeds, planting winter bulbs, tidying up the courtyard beds. Claire texted Ben the evening before. "We'll be there. If you and Lucy feel like getting your hands dirty." Ben had stared at the message a moment, then responded simply, "We'll bring gloves." Now he stood beneath a large oak tree by the playground, watching Lucy hop across stepping stones while balancing a trowel like a sword. Claire crouched near the edge of the school garden, trimming back the overgrown herbs. She looked up and smiled as he approached. "You actually came," she said. "You doubted me." She raised a brow. "Well, you weren't known for your green thumb back in the day." Ben grinned. "Fair, I once killed a cactus." Claire laughed. "That's impressive." He joined her at the bed of rosemary and mint, the scent sharp and comforting as he knelt beside her. For a few minutes they worked in quiet rhythm, cutting, pulling, shaking loose dirt, until the air between them felt natural again. Then Claire said softly, "Do you remember what you said to me the night before I left?" Ben paused, fingers stilling on a stubborn weed. "I remember we watched that dumb movie about the time-traveling baseball player." She smiled faintly. "And after, when we were lying on the porch swing, you said, 'If you ever need a reason to stay, let it be this.'" Ben looked down. The weight of memory settled on his shoulders like a jacket he hadn't worn in years. "I meant it," he said quietly. Claire nodded. "I know, that's why I didn't say goodbye." He turned his head confused. She wiped her forehead with her sleeve and sat back on her heels. "If I'd said goodbye, I would have stayed. And I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough." Ben didn't speak for a long moment. "You think leaving without a word made it easier?" "Not easier, just survivable." They fell into silence again, but this time it wasn't strained. "Just full. I hated you for a long time." Ben admitted, "I kept thinking, maybe I wasn't enough. Maybe you just wanted out, I didn't," she said quickly. "Ben, I loved you. I never stopped loving that version of you. The one who made midnight grilled cheese sandwiches and sang off-key in the truck." He laughed softly. "That guy didn't know much, still doesn't. He knew how to love without conditions. That's more than most," across the garden. Lucy and Max were kneeling beside a row of bulbs, comparing which one looked more like a space onion. Their laughter rose like birdsong. Claire watched them, eyes misting. "Max deserves to know the truth. And I think maybe he's ready." Ben hesitated. "I want to tell him. I just don't want to drop it on him like a plot twist." Claire nodded. "He's sensitive, curious. He notices everything. The other day he asked why your eyes look like his." Ben smiled sadly. "Smart kid, he is. And I think he's starting to understand, even if he doesn't know the words yet." Ben pulled off his gloves and rested his arms on his knees. "I keep thinking about what it means to be a father to someone who's already halfway grown. I miss the early stuff. First steps, first words. He's not a blank page, I'm just showing up in the middle of the book." Claire's voice was quiet but firm. "That doesn't mean you don't belong in the story." He looked at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "Tell me about him." Ben said, "Tell me what I missed." Claire smiled, brushing a lock of hair behind her ear. "He was born on a Thursday afternoon, rainy day. He came out with his fist balled like he was ready to fight the world." Ben chuckled. "He hated green beans, loved dinosaurs, and used to carry around this beat-up stuffed squirrel named Captain Fluff." She laughed, then sobered, and when he was 5, he asked if he could have 2 dads. I told him, "Some kids do." He said, "I think I do too. I just haven't met the other one yet." Ben's throat tightened. I wanted to tell him. Then she continued, "But I was scared. What if he hated me? What if you didn't want to be involved? I didn't even know I had the chance," Ben said softly. Claire reached over and touched his hand. "You do now." They sat like that for a moment, hands brushing lightly between dirt and time, the smell of earth and rosemary mingling in the breeze. Then Lucy came bounding over dirt smudged on her cheeks and a daisy in her hand. "Daddy Max says we can build a worm hotel." Ben laughed, reaching for her. "A what now?" "A hotel, for worms with leaves and everything." Claire stood. "We may have future entrepreneurs on our hands." Ben gave her a look. "You realize we'll be taking those guests home." Claire winced. "You're on worm duty." Max trotted over to them, a leaf in one hand and a proud grin on his face. "Mr. Ben," he said, "do you know any good names for worms?" Ben smiled. "Let's see. Wiggly Sir, Slime's a lot." Max laughed, eyes bright. "That's awesome." Claire watched as her son and his father stood there side by side, naming imaginary worms like they'd been doing it forever. And for a moment, just a brief, shimmering moment, everything felt whole. Claire blinked against the sunlight. Maybe just, maybe they were planting more than bulbs that morning. Maybe something new was beginning to grow. It was just past 8 p.m. when Ben heard the first sharp cough echo from Lucy's room. At first he brushed it off, probably a tickle in her throat from the hayride that afternoon. She'd laughed the whole way, her cheeks flushed pink, from the cold, sticky fingers, from caramel apples. But then came the second cough, and the third ragged and dry. He opened her door to find her curled up in bed, her hair damp with sweat and her cheeks splotched with an unnatural flush. "Daddy," she whispered, voice hoarse, "my tummy hurts." He crossed the room in 2 long strides and pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. It was burning. "Okay, sweetheart," he said gently. "Let's get you cooled down." He carried her to the bathroom, ran a cool cloth under the tap and dabbed her face. Her eyelids fluttered. "Don't feel good, I know, baby," he murmured. "I'm here." He tried calling the clinic, but it was after hours. His regular sitter was out of town, and the neighbor who sometimes watched Lucy was working a double shift. He ran through options in his head, hands shaking slightly as he filled a glass with water and coaxed Lucy into sipping it. Then instinctively he picked up his phone and called Claire. She picked up after one ring. "Ben, I'm sorry to call. It's late. Lucy's burning up, and I can't get anyone." "I don't know what to." His voice caught. "I'm on my way." 15 minutes later, Claire arrived, hair pulled back in a loose braid, keys still in hand. She didn't knock. She just opened the door and walked in like she belonged. "Where is she?" she asked. "Bedroom," Ben said, rubbing his forehead. "I got her temp down a little, but she's still shaking." Claire stepped past him, soft and sure. Within seconds, she was sitting beside Lucy, her voice calm, hands efficient. She checked the girl's pulse, then turned to Ben. "I'm going to make a tea with ginger and a little lemon. Nothing harsh. Her fever's not dangerously high, but it needs watching." Ben stood in the hallway helpless. "You okay if I stay out of the way?" She smiled over her shoulder. "Actually, I need help. Find me a saucepan and that honey I saw in your cabinet the other day." They moved like a quiet team, him boiling water, her crushing ginger with the back of a spoon. The house smelled of lemon and something warm and grounding. Lucy dozed in and out, her breathing softening as the worst of the heat broke. By the time the clock struck 10, the storm outside had begun. Rain slapped against the windows, thunder low and distant. Ben had forgotten it was coming. Claire stepped into the kitchen with 2 mugs and handed him one. "She's asleep," she said softly. "Fever broke. Just needs rest now." Ben exhaled deeply. "I don't know what I would have done if you hadn't answered." "You would have figured it out," she said. "But I'm glad I came." He gestured toward the living room. "You want to sit for a minute?" They took the couch. The house was dark except for the small lamp beside the sofa, casting a pool of golden light that made the storm outside seem far away. Claire took a sip from her mug, then said quietly, "This reminded me of when Max had the flu at 2. I sat up all night on the bathroom floor with him singing lullabies. I didn't know I remembered." Ben looked at her. "You did it all alone?" She nodded. "It was a long stretch of years where I did everything alone." "I wish I'd known," he said about him. About all of it. Claire didn't speak for a long moment. "I used to lie awake at night wondering what kind of dad you would have been," she said finally. "Then I met Lucy, and I knew." Ben's throat tightened. "I'm not perfect. I've made a mess of a lot. But you show up," she said, "every day. That counts more than anything." He looked at her, then really looked. The woman beside him wasn't the bright, wild girl he once knew. She was deeper now, wiser, a little bruised maybe, but so was he. The storm outside cracked, a flicker of lightning, illuminating the windows. Claire drew her knees up on the couch and wrapped her arms around them. Ben leaned back, taking another sip of tea. "I've been thinking," he said. She turned to him, brows raised. "I want to tell Max," he continued. "Soon, not with a script, not with a big dramatic moment. Just, honestly, I want him to hear it from me." Claire studied him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay. And I want him to have a say in what happens next." "He will," she promised. "We'll give him that." He smiled faintly. "You and I, we didn't get to finish our story, did we?" No, she said softly. But maybe this is a new one. Not a continuation, a beginning. Lightning flashed again, followed by a soft rumble, but the house felt steady grounded. Ben watched the rain trail down the window and thought about how strange it was, how storms could bring comfort, not chaos. He looked over at Claire. Her eyes were closed now, the mug cradled in her hands. She wasn't asleep, just resting at peace. And for the first time in a long while, so was he. The following week felt like standing at the edge of a diving board, heart-pounding toes curled against the surface, the water below waiting in silence. Ben woke each day with the certainty that something needed to happen, and yet each evening he found himself hesitating. It wasn't that he doubted what he wanted. He wanted Max to know the truth. He wanted to be part of his son's life, not as a shadowy figure in the background, but as a father, as someone who could build things with him, walk beside him, be the answer to the questions the boy didn't even know how to ask yet. But there were no instruction manuals for moments like this. No YouTube video titled, How to Tell an 8-Year-Old You're His Dad Without Breaking His Heart. So Ben waited. Claire waited too in her own way, quietly circling the subject but never pushing, never forcing. They had slipped into something gentle and unspoken lately, a rhythm that felt almost domestic. Claire brought muffins when she dropped Max off for a play date. Ben fixed the loose hinge on her porch door. Without telling her, it was as though the past had folded them into a softer version of themselves. But the truth was still there, just beneath the surface, humming like a live wire. It was a Saturday afternoon when they all ended up at the community center for Family Art Day. A fundraiser with paints and clay and endless noise. Lucy and Max had dashed to the easel stations as soon as they arrived, leaving Ben and Claire to sip lukewarm coffee in paper cups and pretend not to be overwhelmed by the chaos. Claire leaned against the edge of a table, watching Max draw a house with a red roof and a swing set in the yard. He's been drawing that same house all week. Ben glanced over. Looks like mine. She smiled. He told me it was his favorite place. He didn't say anything, but the comment settled into his chest like a warm stone. Then Max raised his hand, waving them over excitedly. Come look, he called. They walked over and crouched beside him. He'd added 4 stick figures now, 2 adults, 2 kids standing in front of the red-roofed house, each with a smile. Who's that? Claire asked gently, pointing to the tall one with dark hair. Max shrugged. Just someone who helps build things. Ben's breath caught. Claire looked at him, and in that look there was something more than understanding. There was a plea. Please don't let this moment pass. Max turned to Ben. Do you ever build houses? Ben cleared his throat. Not real ones, but I used to help my dad fix old cars. We built a go-kart together once. The engine almost caught fire. Max's eyes lit up. That's awesome. Ben smiled. I've still got the scars on my knuckles. Can we build something together sometime? Ben nodded, voice low. I'd like that. Max Claire stood quietly, arms folded, watching, as the boy who didn't know the truth looked up at the man who did and smiled like he'd found a piece of himself. And suddenly it was too much. I'm going to get more coffee, she mumbled, backing away from the table. Ben hesitated, then turned to Max. Hey, buddy, stay with Lucy. Okay, I'll be right back. He found Claire near the back of the room, standing beside a shelf of donated books, her hand covering her mouth. Hey, he said softly. She turned, her eyes were glassy but dry. Sorry, I didn't mean to bolt. It's okay, he's getting so close, she whispered. He's right there, reaching for something. He doesn't even understand. And she broke off, swallowing hard. I'm terrified I'm going to ruin it. Ben touched her arm gently. You don't know that. I know what it looks like when a kid searches for something that's missing. I lived it, Claire. He's not running from it. He's ready, she shook her head, voice breaking. But what if he hates me for keeping it from him? He won't. You don't know that either. Ben exhaled. Maybe not, but I know he loves you. I see it every time he looks at you. And kids, real kids, they don't need perfect parents. They need truth. Even when it's messy. Claire looked at him, and for a moment she looked like the woman he'd once held in his arms on a summer night, under the stars, full of hope, terrified, brave in the way only someone who has known loss can be. I'll tell him, she said, voice barely above a whisper. But not yet, just a little longer. Just until I find the right words. Ben nodded, the weight of her fear settling into his own heart. When you're ready, I'll be there. They stood in silence, shoulder to shoulder, watching their children laugh and spill paint across the floor, like they were painting the future one bright streak at a time. Later that night, Ben lay awake in the dark, listening to the sound of the old ceiling fan whirring above him. He thought about Max, about the drawing, about the way the boy's eyes had shone when he asked to build something together. Ben had seen it before in Lucy and himself, that quiet hunger for connection, for knowing where you come from. He closed his eyes and whispered a promise into the dark. I'll be the man he can count on, even if he doesn't know why yet. The first snowfall came earlier than expected that year, blanketing the small Oregon town in soft, clean silence. Ben watched it from his porch, a mug of coffee warming his hands. The sky above a pale, hushed gray snow always had a way of making things look new, untouched, like maybe the past hadn't left so many footprints behind. He should have felt at peace. He wasn't Claire had promised to tell Max. Not all at once, but in a way he could understand. They'd talked it through, even practiced a few versions, honest, gentle, simple words that could open the door without scaring the boy. But day after day passed and the conversation never happened. And Ben, for all his patience, could feel something building inside him. Not anger, not quite, but a slow ache of urgency. He didn't want secrets between them anymore. Not between him and Claire, not between him and Max. That Sunday, they were all back at Maple Creek Park. Lucy and Max were building snow creatures, half snowman, half monster with sticks for fangs and pine cones for eyes. Claire sat beside Ben on the wooden bench near the frozen pond, sipping cocoa from a thermos. He asked me again, she said, voice low. Last night, he wanted to know why you come around so much now, why he sees himself in you. Ben looked straight ahead. And what did you say? Claire hesitated. I said, you're someone who matters. That's not a lie, he replied, but it's not the truth either. I know why. She exhaled, her breath a cloud in the air. I was going to tell him today, after the park. Ben nodded slowly. I can wait a few more hours. Claire glanced at him. He's going to ask you things I can't answer. About why you weren't there. About why I didn't tell you. I'll tell him what I know, Ben said, and I won't make you the villain, but he deserves to hear it from me too. She was quiet for a long time. Then with a soft tremble in her voice, she whispered, I'm scared, Ben. He turned to her. So am I. They sat in silence, watching the kids argue about whether the snow monster needed a scarf. Claire's fingers curled tightly around the edge of her cup. When it happened too fast. Lucy let out a shriek, not of fear, but playful triumph, and Max took off running after her. The kids tore across the snowy field, laughter echoing until Lucy darted behind the gazebo, and Max kept running. Right out of view, Ben stood slowly scanning the horizon. Max, Claire rose too. Max, no answer. Lucy emerged a moment later, breathless. He went the other way. I think he was crying. What? Claire's voice cracked. Ben was already moving. They split up, calling his name through the white-dusted trees, through the hollow hush of the woods behind the park. Snowflakes began to fall again. Tiny and sharp, Ben's boots crunched through the frozen brush, his pulse hammering in his ears. Then near the edge of the lake trail, he saw them. Footprints small and fast, veering toward the old dock. Ben broke into a run. He found Max sitting at the very end of the dock, legs swinging over the icy water, arms pulled around himself. Ben slowed. Hey, buddy. Max didn't look up. Ben sat beside him, careful not to get too close. You scared us. Max sniffed. Sorry. Ben waited a moment, then said, Want to tell me what's going on? Silence. Then in a voice too calm for a child, his age, Max said, You're my dad, aren't you? Ben's breath caught. Who told you that? No one. Max said, Not really, but I figured it out. You look like me. You feel like me. Ben swallowed. I wanted your mom to be the one to tell you. But yes, I am. Max's shoulders tensed. So where were you? Ben exhaled slowly. I didn't know you existed, Max. Your mom didn't tell me back then. If I had known, I would have been there. Max was quiet. I don't get it. I don't either, Ben said gently. All I know is that I missed a lot, and I'm sorry for every moment I wasn't with you. Max finally turned his face toward him. His eyes were wet. I thought I did something wrong. Ben's heart broke wide open. No, he said fiercely now. No, Max, you didn't do anything wrong. This isn't about you doing something bad. This is about adults trying to figure out hard things. Max stared down at the lake. Are you staying now? Ben reached out and placed a hand on Max's back. If you want me to. Max leaned into him barely at first, then fully, a small trembling body finding its anchor. Ben wrapped his arms around the boy. I'm not going anywhere. Okay? I'm here. For real. They sat like that as the snow drifted quietly down the lake, still and endless before them. By the time Claire found them, her cheeks were streaked with worry and her boots soaked. Max ran to her without hesitation and buried his face in her coat. She dropped to her knees and held him close. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she whispered. I should have told you sooner. I was just afraid. Max didn't say anything. He just held on. When he finally pulled back, he looked at her. Can we all go home now? Claire looked up at Ben, her eyes full. Yes, she said. Let's go home. As they walked back to the car, Max held Claire's hand on one side, Ben's on the other. 3 shadows, one family stretching across the snow. The sky had turned indigo by the time they returned home. A hush fell over the world, one of those rare winter evenings where everything felt still, as if time had paused out of reverence for something too fragile to name. Snow clung to the edges of the streetlights, and the only sound was the crunch of boots on the front path as Claire, Max, and Ben approached Claire's porch. Max clutched Ben's hand the whole walk from the car, not with desperation but with quiet resolve, like he'd made a decision and wasn't letting go of it now. Claire unlocked the door and ushered them in. The warmth hit instantly, radiators humming the scent of cinnamon from a candle burning on the counter. It felt like safety, or at least the beginning of it. Max kicked off his boots and went straight to the living room, curling up on the couch beneath a blanket he'd had since he was a toddler. He didn't say much. He didn't have to. Claire and Ben moved quietly around the kitchen, making grilled cheese sandwiches and hot chocolate. No one wanted anything too serious just yet. The air was still full of something delicate, an emotional aftershock that required gentleness to navigate. Ben poured warm milk into the mugs while Claire buttered bread. Do you think I made it worse by waiting so long? She asked softly. He glanced over. No. You did what you thought was best. That's all any of us ever do. But I watched him hurt today. She swallowed. I watched his whole world shift because of me. Ben paused, and I watched him run to you. When it did, Claire turned eyes full. He loves you already. You know, Ben smiled faintly. I'm starting to believe that. They brought the plates and mugs to the coffee table. Max sat up slowly, hands cupped around the cocoa eyes, a little distant, but clearer now. I don't really get all of it yet, he said, staring into the marshmallows. But I don't feel mad. Claire sat beside him. That's okay. You don't have to understand everything today. He looked at Ben. So, what now? Ben leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Now we take it one step at a time. You've already got a life that's full and good. I don't want to change that. I just want to be a part of it. If you'll let me. Max was quiet for a long time. Then he said, can we build that go-kart sometime? Ben laughed. Yeah, buddy, we absolutely can. Max nodded. And maybe you can teach me how to change a tire. Claire chuckled. You really want to get grease on your jeans? It's part of being a boy, Max replied with mock seriousness. They all laughed, and for the first time since the truth was spoken, the room felt light. Later, after Max had gone to bed, insisting that Ben tuck him in, and then asking if he could sleep with the nightlight on, and the door cracked open. Claire and Ben returned to the living room, the remains of their quiet dinner scattered on the table. Ben sank into the armchair and looked around the room. Framed photos, children's books, a forgotten sock beneath the bookshelf. It was all so lived in. So full. I never pictured this, he said quietly. Claire, sitting cross-legged on the couch, tilted her head. Pictured what? This life. This version of it. Us here. Him upstairs. That I'd come home from a night in the snow and find out I have a son who wants me around. Claire leaned back, eyes warm. Neither did I. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, the only sound the faint hum of the radiator. I think today changed everything, she said softly. Ben nodded, in a good way, in a necessary way. She glanced at him. What about Lucy? I'm going to tell her. Carefully, she already adores Max, so that's a start. Claire smiled. She's got your heart, big and unfiltered. Ben looked down. I've spent so much time surviving, Claire. Paying bills, working night shifts, raising Lucy. I forgot what it was like to live. She studied him for a long moment. You're allowed to have more. I didn't think I was. Well, you were wrong, she said, a teasing softness in her voice. Then more gently, you're not just some guy passing through, Ben. You're part of this now. You're part of him, and maybe of me too. Ben looked at her, and something flickered between them, old and new all at once. The past no longer haunted them. It anchored them, gave shape to something tender, something real. You know what Max told me on the dock, Ben said after a beat. What he asked me if I was staying. Claire's breath caught. Ben met her eyes. And I told him I wasn't going anywhere. She didn't speak. She just reached across the coffee table and took his hand. Outside, snowflakes began to fall again, catching in the streetlight like tiny stars. The world was still spinning, still unpredictable. But in that house, on that quiet night by the lake, they had found something unshakable. Family. The following weeks unfolded like a soft sunrise, slow glowing a light that crept in without fanfare. Everything didn't magically change overnight, but it changed nonetheless. Max started referring to Ben as my friend, who's kind of my dad when talking to his classmates. Lucy, after hearing the full story, told gently with Claire present, looked thoughtful for a moment, then asked, so does that make Max my brother or my best friend? Both Ben had said, and Lucy nodded, entirely satisfied. Now it was Saturday morning and Ben was flipping pancakes in Claire's kitchen while the kids chased each other around the living room, giggling like wind-up toys that never ran out of energy. Claire leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, watching it all with a quiet awe. This feels strange, she said. Ben glanced over his shoulder. Strange good or strange, run for your life. Strange like... She paused like I never thought I'd see this. You here, the kids together, everything just working. Ben flipped another pancake and smiled. Well, let's not jinx it. We still have to survive the syrup spill. I feel coming in 3, 2, a crash and a squeal erupted from the living room. Max, Claire called, already moving. Not on the couch, Ben chuckled. Told you. By the time breakfast was served, the kids were breathless and messy, and Ben had flour on his shoulder from Lucy's enthusiastic mixing. They all sat at the table, syrup dripping down their plates, laughter coming in bursts. It felt ordinary. It felt right. After the dishes were cleared and the kids retreated to build a Lego fort in Max's room, Claire and Ben sat on the front porch, mugs of fresh coffee, warming their hands against the chill. Do you think this lasts? She asked softly. Ben looked out over the snowy yard. I think anything worth keeping takes work. But yeah, I think it can. Claire sipped her coffee. He asked me last night if you were going to move in. Ben nearly choked on his drink. He did. She nodded. I told him that grown-ups take a little longer to figure things out. Ben chuckled, smart answer. Claire looked at him. What about you? Have you figured things out? He was quiet a long moment, then set his mug down. I know that I want to be here, he said, with Max, with Lucy, with you. I don't know if that means moving in tomorrow or slowly building something, but I do know this. When I wake up now, I don't feel like I'm surviving anymore. I feel like I'm becoming someone I used to hope I'd be. Claire's eyes shimmered, not with tears, but with something deeper recognition. I see it, she whispered. You're showing up for them, for me, for yourself. He turned to her. Are you afraid? Yes, she said honestly, but not the kind of fear that keeps me from trying. The kind that means something matters. They were interrupted by the sound of shuffling and a loud crash from inside. Claire started to rise, but Ben held up a hand. Stay, he said, I'll get it. He went inside to find Max and Lucy surrounded by Lego bricks and a toppled chair. Engineering malfunction, Max declared. Earthquake. Lucy added, wide-eyed. Ben grinned, cleanup crew to the rescue. As they gathered the scattered blocks, Max looked up. Dad. Ben froze, his breath catching, before he turned slowly. Max stared at him, cautious but steady. Is it okay if I call you that sometimes? Ben's voice came out in a whisper. It's more than okay. Max smiled a little crooked, then returned to his pile. Ben stayed there a moment longer, letting the word echo through him. Dad, something sacred, something earned. Later that afternoon, Ben found himself back at his own house, Lucy asleep in the back seat after a day of play in Coco. He carried her gently to bed, tucking her in beneath the blanket. She still called her Cloud. Then he wandered into the kitchen and stood there letting the quiet press around him. It wasn't that this house felt empty. It just didn't feel like home anymore. Not the way Claire's did, not the way a place does when laughter lingers in the walls and family hums through the floorboards. Home, he realized, wasn't four walls and a front door. It was where people waited for you, where children argued over syrup and built crooked Lego towers, where a woman looked at you like you mattered not for what you'd lost or hadn't been, but for who you chose to become. Home was where forgiveness lived. He pulled out his phone and opened a new text. Ben, I don't need a timeline, but when the time feels right, I'm ready for all of it. Claire replied just 2 minutes later. Claire, me too, one brick at a time. Ben set the phone down, heart light, one brick at a time. He could build that. The town's annual winter fair arrived on a breath of frost, and cinnamon booths lined the sidewalks, strings of white lights twinkling overhead as carolers sang near the town square gazebo. It was the kind of small-town event that stitched the community together year after year. Hot cider in paper cups, wooden ornaments sold by retirees and children, tugging at mittened hands toward candy stalls. Ben stood near the carousel with Lucy perched on his shoulders, her knit hat bouncing as she pointed at everything. All at once, Daddy Max said, "There's a snow maze by the church steps." He smiled, shifting her weight a little. "That's so what's the prize if we find our way out? Hot chocolate with whipped cream and extra marshmallows? Now that's a worthy mission." Claire stood nearby, a camera slung around her neck, laughing as she snapped candid shots of the kids. Max wore a red puffer jacket and a determined expression, clearly ready to conquer the maze and the world. For a while, they let the kids roam ahead through the snow-lined path, darting in and out of the maze's leafy evergreen walls, their voices ringing like bells. Ben and Claire walked slowly behind the soft crunch of snow underfoot, and the air filled with the scent of pine and caramel apples. "It's strange," she said after a while, "but this is the first time in years I've felt still. Like nothing's pulling me in 5 directions." He glanced at her. "You mean aside from two kids running toward a sugar high?" She laughed. "Aside from that." They stopped near the edge of the square, where a string quartet was softly playing under a heated tent. Claire looked up at the lights overhead, her face touched by the warm glow. It made her look softer, younger somehow, like the woman Ben remembered from long ago, and the woman she'd become had finally merged into one. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. "I got this for you," he said, holding it out. She blinked. "Ben, don't get too excited. It's not jewelry or chocolate. I'm not that smooth." She took the box, carefully opening it to find a tiny wooden carving of a treehouse, hand-painted imperfect. "Did you make this?" she asked, surprised. "I tried," he admitted. "Max helped with the base, said it was for our, maybe future backyard." Claire's eyes softened. "He talks about the future a lot lately." Ben looked down. "Yeah, me too." She touched the carving gently, then tucked it into her coat pocket. "It's beautiful." They were quiet a moment, the music rising gently behind them, people passing by with smiles and scarves and steaming cups. Then Claire said softly, "Do you know the first time I saw you? I mean, really saw you?" Ben tilted his head. "High school football game, right? I spilled nachos on your shoes." She smiled. "No, it was 2 weeks after that. You were helping your mom close up the bookstore, and I walked by with my sketch pad. You didn't see me, but you were standing there holding a stack of books like it was sacred, like you loved the stories in them more than the world outside." Ben chuckled. "I still do." "That's when I knew," Claire said, "that you were someone different." He looked at her, his face open, vulnerable, in the way that only years of learning and losing can make a man. "And what about now?" he asked. Claire stepped closer. The music swelled, her voice dropped to a whisper. "Now I know you've always been the one." The words weren't loud. They didn't need to be. They lived in the air between them, hanging like breath on a cold night, fleeting but undeniable. Ben reached for her hand. Claire, she stopped him with a smile. You don't have to say anything. He shook his head. But I want to. He took both her hands, now holding them like something precious and breakable. I used to think I wasn't allowed to want more. He said, that life had picked its path for me. But you, Max, Lucy, you reminded me that I still have a choice, that I can build something new. Brick by brick, moment by moment, Claire's eyes glistened. I'm not perfect, Ben. I've made mistakes that still keep me up at night. So have I, he said. But I'm not afraid of imperfect anymore. I'm afraid of not showing up. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. Then stay, she whispered. Stay and keep showing up. He smiled. That sounds like a vow. It is, she said. They didn't kiss. Not yet. This wasn't a moment for grand gestures. It was quieter. Deeper, two people standing in the middle of a snow-dusted fairground, while laughter and lights swirled around them, and time for a moment stood still. Later they walked back to the car, children giggling ahead of them, cheeks pink from cold and joy. Max reached back and grabbed Ben's hand. Lucy tugged on Claire's coat. Can we do this every year? Claire glanced at Ben, who nodded. Yes, sweetheart, she said. Every year. As they drove home, snow falling softly around them, the town behind, glowing with light. Ben looked in the rearview mirror at the two children, fast asleep, their heads tipped together. And beside him, Claire, warm, quiet, smiling. Home wasn't a place, it was this, a whisper that had become a vow. The first signs of spring arrived not with a grand announcement, but in small, almost shy gestures, the gentle drip of melting snow from the roof, the flash of green daring to push up through frozen soil, and the way the sunlight lingered just a little longer in the late afternoon. Ben stood on the back deck of Claire's house, coffee mug in hand, watching Max and Lucy race across the yard. Max had grown over the past few months, not taller exactly, but fuller in spirit. His movements had more confidence now. His laughter was easier, louder. Lucy trailed behind him, a blur of pink sneakers and determination, calling, Wait for me. Wiggly Worm. That was his new nickname, born out of a rainy day game they'd made up weeks earlier. It stuck, and Ben didn't have the heart to change it. Inside, Claire was setting out plates for lunch, grilled cheese and tomato soup, their unofficial family meal, and humming a tune Ben half remembered from their college days. He stepped through the sliding door, letting the warm scent of home hit him like a soft embrace. Smells like childhood, he said, grinning. Claire looked up. Yours or theirs? He paused, maybe both. She smiled and placed two steaming bowls on the table. Max wants to show you the treehouse plans after lunch. He's got big dreams. Tell him I'm ready with nails and too much optimism. They sat together at the kitchen table, sunlight spilling through the window like honey. Max and Lucy thundered inside, cheeks red from the wind eyes gleaming. Dad, guess what? Max announced, breathless. I designed a pulley system so we can haul snacks into the treehouse without going down the ladder. Ben grinned. That's the kind of engineering this family needs. Lucy nodded solemnly. And I'm the safety inspector. Claire raised a brow. That's good considering last week's indoor zipline disaster. The kids dissolved into giggles and Ben leaned back in his chair, soaking in the moment. The ordinariness of it, the perfection of it. Later, after the dishes were cleared and Max had spread out blueprints of wobbly lines and penciled in snack zones, Claire pulled Ben aside onto the porch. The sun had dipped behind the treetops, casting the yard in a soft amber glow. I've been thinking, she said, fingers grazing the railing. He waited. This house, it's always been mine. Mine and Max's, our refuge. But lately it doesn't feel like just mine anymore. Ben turned to her. It feels like ours. Claire nodded. Yes, and I was wondering how you'd feel about making it official. He raised a brow. Are you proposing, Miss Whitmore? She laughed. Not quite. But I am saying, maybe it's time you and Lucy stayed. Really stayed. Ben was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached for her hand and laced their fingers together. I was waiting for you to say that, he said, because every night I drive back to our place it feels a little less like home. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Then don't drive back tonight. He kissed the top of her head. Deal. The next morning, Max set up a family meeting in the living room, complete with chairs arranged in a semicircle, and Lucy holding a clipboard like a miniature assistant principal. "We have an announcement," Max declared. "We the kids approve of Dad moving in." Claire hid a smile, good to know, but Max added, raising a finger, "He must promise to help build the treehouse, drive us to soccer, and never forget taco night." Ben raised a hand. "I accept these terms." Signed, sealed, and delivered. Lucy added. The room erupted in laughter, and Ben felt something shift in him. Not an earthquake, not a sudden revelation, but a solid click. Like a door had closed gently behind him, and another had opened wide. Not long after the school hosted its annual spring talent showcase, the gymnasium buzzed with anticipation, the walls lined with hand-painted posters, the air smelling faintly of popcorn and gym mats. Parents filled the bleachers, waving at their kids from folding chairs. Lucy performed a poem she'd written called "My Brother is a Rocket," and Max played a simple melody on the keyboard, hesitant, sweet, but full of heart. Claire clapped with both hands over her heart. Ben's eyes blurred halfway through, and he didn't bother wiping them. Afterward, the four of them stood outside under the flowering cherry trees. "You were amazing," Ben said, kneeling to Max's level. Max shrugged but smiled wide. "I felt kind of nervous." Ben ruffled his hair. "That just means it mattered." Claire reached for Ben's hand as the sun dipped behind the school building. "You know," she said quietly, "none of this was the plan." He looked at her. "Best plan we never made." And so the story didn't end, because stories like this don't. They stretch and grow and take on new shapes over dinner tables and homework battles, soccer games and scraped knees, whispered apologies and goodnight kisses. It wasn't perfect. No life worth living is, but it was real. And as Ben stood in the middle of the yard one evening, weeks later, holding a hammer, while Max handed him crooked nails and Lucy read out building instructions in a voice far too serious for a 7-year-old, Claire leaned in the doorway and watched her family, her whole imperfect, beautiful family. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to, because this was the kind of life that whispered softly to the weary and the lost, "You're home now." And for the first time in a very long time, everyone believed it. We'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and let's see how far this story has traveled. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales of love, hope, and second chances. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today. Your presence means more than you know. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and keep believing in the quiet miracles around you.